I would love to talk about sex. Now I have your attention after So sex, sexuality, sexual rights and gender equality as a battlefield between the West and the East, and how extreme right, how we call it even here, use it against Muslims in particular and immigrants in general, and everybody that is not white and not European enough. So I would like to point out the issue of sexual rights and gender equality as something that kind of on a very sneaky way came in not only as a part of right-wing discourse, but is now becoming as center and leftish, and whatever we call left and socialist in Europe. As someone coming from Bosnia and ex-Yugoslavia, I am sometimes very disappointed in the socialist movement in Europe in general, and especially in the Netherlands, because especially on this subject, the things are very much moving. So I'll be very boring and reading a few parts and then jump in again later. The fall of the Berlin Wall was the announcement and the symbolic expression of the New World Order. With the defeat of communism, the West had lost its other. But shortly after, the earlier economic opposition, capitalism versus communism, was replaced with Huntington's Clash of Civilizations. This discourse positioned Muslims and Islam as the new other that represent conservative, oppressive, patriarchal, undemocratic and theocratic systems. Gender equality and later sexual equality became an important component of this discourse, showing that Muslims could never share the values of the West, as Huntington proposed. In addition to those theories, a lot of scholars adopted the idea that only through liberalism and secularism, and this is for French case also very good point, can gender and sexual equality be achieved. Feminist historian as John Scott makes this case and reminds us that women were absent from the original movements of secularism in the making of modern nation states, whose founders did not consider women as political equals. Think about France and the rights of women to vote only in 1944. Engelhardt and Norris argue that the true conflict is actually the sexual clash of civilization. And again, this is a very important point. From such a line of reasoning, the secular West, here it comes again, as champion and guardian of gender equality, is opposed to the rest, most especially the Muslim world, whose deeply patriarchal cultures do violence to women, women's flourishing, a narrative invoked widely across the political spectrum, for example, in the US after 9/11 to invade Iraq and Afghanistan. In the post-9/11 era, more than ever, Muslims were opposed to the West, portrayed as the enemies of our liberal views and modernity. Whether the focus of these discussions was Iranian theocracy, ISIS terrorism, or Muslim immigrants in Western Europe, the Muslim other was increasingly depicted as a threat to Western societies. In Holland, after the assassination of the right-wing populist Pim Fortuyn in 2002, the Islam-critical artist Theo van Gogh in 2004, debates around Islam and Muslims in the Netherlands became more extreme. Just as in the other Western societies, the Dutch Muslim other was measured by its attitudes towards gender and sexual equality. The increased tolerance of homosexuality in the Netherlands became a part of the nationalist discourse, and identity, as Givray and de Jong argue, has also come to be embedded in an anti-immigrant and specifically anti-Muslim discourse. And in that case, the far right used that discourse as a way to show how Muslims are actually very much non-Western, because Muslims a priori hate gays, according to the far right, while traditionally far right and right in general is not really supportive of LGBTI movement, for example, or gender equality. So here the paradox comes that people in France and Belgium and in Netherlands can really see coming that, for example, gay voters for Marie Le Pen, gay voters for Wilders really believe in the narrative that all the Muslims are against homosexuals, then they vote for these parties, the same parties and leaders that ally with each other. And even in Budapest, and then we come back to Hungary, go to the family summit that is hosted by the Hungarian government to organize pro-family summit, where the Russian Orthodox Church leader, evangelical church from America, right-wing leaders from all around Europe and the world talk about the traditional family and how actually we have to fight against Soros' idea about LGBTI rights and women's rights and women's equality, which makes it very paradoxical. So my recommendation to fight against what we call extreme right-wing, as a kind of euphemism, like we talked, like we are trying to whitewash our own deep right-wing issues within ourselves, we actually have to give the voice to people that could fight those narratives in both ways. Fight against Islamophobia and homophobia and transphobia, and focus more on intersectional approach, because we do have identity. Nobody is only black, nobody is only Muslim, nobody is only gay. There are a lot of intersectionalities. So please focus also on these identities. Thank you.